America. My name is Osei-Frimpong, and it's very important that we get the villains of this murder correct. And the villain of the Brian Thompson, Luigi Mangione murder is Brian Thompson. He is both the victim and the villain. You can be both victim and villain. It's pretty much the end of every action movie you've seen. The guy careening to his death was also the villain. This is the case where Brian Thompson is a villain. Now, he's an American modern villain, so it's not obvious that he's a villain. In fact, you have seen many tributes to Brian Thompson as the murdered CEO, as like some sort of sympathetic case. He had a family, and now how can murder be good? His kids don't have a father. And I think maybe Brian Thompson should have thought of that before he decided to make $10 million a year. That's not a small amount of money. $10 million a year figuring out new and inventive ways to deny healthcare claims. That's his whole job. I suspect his life looks like some form of waking up, kissing his lovely wife and hugging his kids and going out and spending the rest of the day strategizing on how to deny more people health insurance. He enlisted and was supportive of artificial intelligence, doing the automatic denies. And it's one thing if this is a necessary industry, but it's an industry that in a well-ordered world should have been federalized. So let me tell you right now, if you find yourself working a job that shouldn't exist, then you should probably quit and find a job that should exist, even if it's a low level at a job that should exist. We should have people who make roads, and we should have people who teach school and all of that stuff. Those things should exist. His job literally shouldn't exist. And if you find yourself where your job is figuring out how to separate people from the care that their doctor asks them to get for their life, then that's probably not the greatest job. That's not the greatest job. I'm not saying you deserve to die, but I'm not surprised when someone gets fed up and kills you. That's why you're paid $10 million a year. You're not paid because of your wonderful intellect. You're paid because you have the quality of character for whom you're okay with that being your calling. And you're married to the quality of spouse who's okay spending that money that you got. That you got figuring out new and inventive ways with pluck and verve to separate people from their prescribed health care. That is not a great life. And I remember I was dating an investment banker. I was freaking out. I was dating an investment banker 15, 20 years, a long time ago. When I was in my 20s, I was in Chicago, so I must have been 25 or 26. And I was dating an investment banker, and I couldn't do it. There was a way in which, and she worked in what it wasn't called ESG then, but it might have been for BP. If she wasn't the banker, she was working for BP. She was working for BP, and in their nonprofit sector, like kind of the greenwashing sector, and I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it because I knew, and this was right after the Deepwater Horizon pipeline had exploded, and I just knew that she was in charge of creating blood money, creating ethical cover in order to do this awful work. And there's a way in which we need energy. So in a way that we don't actually need United Healthcare. United Healthcare shouldn't exist. And that's a problem. This idea that Brian Thompson was just working his job. One, he wasn't a low-level employee who just was kind of working his job. He was the CEO. So it was he was actually orchestrating and executing the vision of the board and figuring out a way to make the board money, which he then stole because Brian Thompson, big surprise, was under investigation for insider trading and dumping a bunch of stock when he knew that he was that the Firemen Pensions Association was investigating and United Health for using this AI system that was denying an absurd amount of claims, right? So Brian Thompson had privileged access to a knowledge of a class action suit that that involved a firefighter's pension and I think a few other people against United Healthcare for using this AI system that had an error rate of allegedly 90%. And so he dumped a bunch of stock before the news of the suit hit the fan and the stock price dipped. So I don't know. I read that United lost $25 billion off of that. You know, the stock price went down $25 billion off of that that news. But Brian Thompson didn't lose a dime because he dumped his stock before and probably rebought when it was at the dip. So that's something you have to watch out for. By the way, if you want information about this, I saw a few different spots, but Glenn Klippenstein is a journalist who's actually doing really good work on the other side of Brian Thompson, that side you don't get on like from the media, the side that's actually relevant, the side that got him killed. He didn't get killed because he was a loving father and a good family man. He got killed because he was in charge of separating people from their health care. So if you don't want to get killed, don't do that as a job. And this is important because a lot of people are like, well, you know, he was a poor working class guy who through hard work and grit found his way into that profession and rose into that profession. And that is all true, but that is an awful profession. It's like you don't want to be the guy who found a way to make a wonderful life of yourself doing awful work. Doing like being an assassin or something, like doing awful work. That's not, insofar as that's the American dream, that is not the dream I want. It's not like the American dream is to move out west and murder a bunch of Native Americans. Insofar as that's the American dream, that's not an America that we should be proud of. That's not America we should uphold. You know, the plucky Irish tenement farmers who moved out with the Homestead Act. And anyway, so we need to be honest about the stories we tell ourselves about what success in America looks like, and what being a good family man in America looks like. If you're a good family man by exploitation, if that's your job, that's horrible. You're like a horrible human being and a bad role model for your kids. Your kids should be ashamed of you. Your kids should be ashamed of you. And your wife should think herself as a prostitute, because if she's for you for the money, then and not for the character, then you know that's pretty awful. And you're probably an awful person. You just came from poor circumstances and now you're a lucrative awful person. The best thing Brian Thompson probably did with his whole life is spectacularly die in a way that forced the conversation, that brought the conversation to this issue to get the Brian Thompsons out of jobs. Because like I said, in a well-ordered world, United Healthcare probably shouldn't exist. There shouldn't be an industry leader in denying healthcare, denying claims. Right? So I call him the American Eichmann, and I do think that that's the name that needs to stick. Brian Thompson was the American Eichmann because Eichmann was a mid-level Nazi logistics officer, right? Hannah Arendt wrote a very good book wrote a pretty good book about his trial called Eichmann in Jerusalem. And it describes Adolf Eichmann as like a bright guy, but not particularly creative, who pretty much kind of just wanted to get ahead. He just wanted to get ahead in logistics, and he had a very good head for moving Jews. He was very good from getting Jews from point A to point B. He didn't consider himself anti-Semitic. He had many Jewish friends. He was just very good at getting Jews to board that train to point B, and whatever happened at point B was just like not his problem. He was just wanting to get ahead, move to a little bit bigger cubicle. Or the Third Reich equivalent of the cubicle, right? He wasn't an ideologue or anything fancy like that. He was like, So you listen to Eichmann talk and you listen to Brian Thompson talk. It's all just kind of pablum, but he was very good at logistics. He had the stomach for it and the disposition for it. And much like Thompson, the accountant who just kind of made a way, was very good at separating people, at figuring out new inventive ways to for denying people's claims. Eichmann was very good at moving Jews. And he made a niche for himself and made a very good life for himself and was very respected for himself. And as he was a facilitator of the Holocaust as part of his job. And make no mistake, denying people claims isn't an ancillary part of Brian Thompson's job. It was the job. It was how he made money, figuring out ways to deny claims. How I make money is this show. It's going to be a little bit hard for me to get, a better paying gig after this. So if you appreciate what I'm doing, which I think you should, go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 because 'tis the season. And, got to think about camps for my kids and all of that stuff because that's the kind of thing I do as a good father. I do this kind of show. Now, Brian Thompson is only a little bit older than I am, but we have different callings in life. Right? Is he more successful? Well, he makes $10 million a year, and I do not make that. But if anyone's going to I'm pretty sure that if I get taken out, one, it will never be by my own hand. I love my family and I love this life too much. So if I get suicided out there, I didn't do it. It was the FBI. Hello, FBI. I know you're watching. It wasn't by my own hand. But whoever kills me, I don't think that the fallout is going to be mixed about my contribution to American letters, right? So if I get assassinated, no, I don't think people are going to say he had it coming because he used his intellect for evil things. Whereas Brian Thompson very much used his intellect. And I'm telling you right now, he used his intellect for evil things. He had choices. He could have been an accountant for many other firms. It would have been less lucrative, but do you really need $10 million a year? Is that okay? Is that okay that you take that money in order to be the bad guy? And look, you want to be the boss. You want to pay. You have to pay the cost, and the cost of that is the odd assassination. The cost of that is your kids hopefully watching this video and realizing my dad was a whole jerk. I don't have to be that jerk. Young Thompsons, you do not have to be your father. You could actually be good for the world living. Your contribution can come living, not through your death. And not because you die spectacularly and people are happy because you die. Thompsons, you have a chance, young Thompsons. So hopefully, with your dad's money and my wisdom, you'll make something of your life. By the way, so there's this idea that, Thompson was just either just following orders or everything he did was legal. Yes, everything he did was legal, but that's why you need an autonomous sense of morality in a legalistic society. Or you'll just become a parasite. You need an autonomous sense of morality in a legalist society. The laws are there to help us figure out different kinds of good ways to be. They're not there to allow us to be bad. Does that make sense? The laws are there so that we can figure out a way to be good in a way that's different than other people are being good. They're not there for us to figure out a way to exploit each other and make our nut by exploiting. So you need an autonomous morality for that to work. People get this wrong with respect to the freedom of speech, right? So freedom of speech is the freedom to actually speak your truth and figure out the truth in a way that's different from other people speaking their truth and figuring out the way that's truth. That's why they can't censor you and you can't censor them. It's not there for you to lie. The purpose of free speech is not there to lie. We don't have a right to free speech so that you can lie. We have a right to free speech so that you can figure out a truth in a way that's different than other people can figure out a truth, and so that you kind of have a quality of autonomy. Some people say we're entering a brutal time. I don't think we're entering a brutal time. I think the brutal time, I think it was more brutal before we could actually talk about it. People just died quietly. I think we're entering into a better time. Well, I don't know. There's going to be, like with Trump coming into power, there's going to be some open brutality. But, there were pepper spraying protesters and some horrible times for the left and progressive movement. So I don't know if this is going to be more brutal. I think the pain's going to be shared around in a little bit more democratic way, and maybe a little bit more spectacularly, but I don't know if the sum total of pain is going to be the same. I think it might be more. Right, so you need me because mainstream media isn't going to tell you the truth about Brian Thompson. Honestly, if mainstream media was more honest about Brian Thompson, he probably would still be alive. If we didn't need a spectacular death to get the truth of his villainy, then we wouldn't have to kill him. We would just vote to nationalize his industry. I hope you get that Brian Thompson's death is a failure, is a media failure. We could have actually articulated the frustrations and translated those frustrations into a productive dialogue when Medicare for All was in the political water. But the failure of media to not be owned and operated by, powers that like the control of controlling your healthcare. The failure of our media led us to a moment where the only way we can talk about this and everyone get on the same page is if Luigi Magnoni forces everyone on the same page by slaying Brian Thompson. So, even if I'm not an advocate for murder, I don't have any other way for us to all be talking about this. I don't even have any other way for us to talk about the non-obvious villainy of Brian Thompson. Because until he was slain and we do more public autopsies in consideration of his life, we don't think of him as a villain. He is still an aspiration for a lot of people. My job on this microphone is to kill that aspiration. Now, when you kill an aspiration, you don't have to necessarily kill a person. I'm trying to do it with my mouth. I'm trying to do it nobody who aspires to be Brian Thompson should be proud of their life. Nobody who aspires to be Brian Thompson should be proud of their family. No kid of Brian Thompson should be proud to have that as a father. No wife of Brian Thompson should be proud to have that as a provider. You're provided by blood money. You should be ashamed of yourself. So you have to understand that all jobs are not good jobs just because they're legal and lucrative. All jobs are not good jobs because they're legal and lucrative, and all lucrative jobs are not the American dream as a form of success. So we need to understand Brian Thompson as the villain, as a discretionary villain. He could have done other things with his life. He could have done other things with his intellect. He decided to get that bag. He decided to use his intellect and his background in order to deny people health care and get millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars doing it. That's how he decided to spend his one life. That's how, and that's discretionary. He didn't have to spend his life. He didn't even have to raise his family that way. There are other ways to raise your family. So this idea, if he really cared about his family, he would have gotten a different job. If he really cared about his family, he would have gotten a different job. So shame on him. Shame on him for doing that to his family, for risking his family, for the money. Shame on him. And yeah, because like not only like forget the fact that he was, you shouldn't forget the fact, but forget the fact he was trying to separate people from their healthcare. On the other side, he was even defrauding his shareholders. So I don't know if he was looking at jail time, but Martha Stewart saw jail time. But either way, he was trying to get rich. He was doing whatever it takes to get rich. That was his life. And if that's the American dream, to come from a working class background and do whatever it takes to get rich, we are a crap nation. Like, we are a shallow nation. We should be ashamed of ourselves. We need to dream bigger, dream bigger and dream better. So we need to, I want you to, watch this in your Sunday school or whatever, your book club, and talk about it, and talk about the dreams you have for your kids. The dreams you have for your kids. Do you want them to be Brian Thompson? Are you sending them Brian Thompson vibes? Do you want them to be Brian Thompson? Would you be proud of your kid if your kid were Brian Thompson? I would be ashamed. I would be ashamed of my kid if my kid were Brian Thompson. I would be like, my kid, in a world of opportunity where you can do so much in America, my kid chose to do this because he likes the money. By the way, this is what I do for my life. So go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com. Kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. So I can continue doing what I'm doing, keep the roof over the head. And and if you don't kick in, I'm not going to work for a company that shouldn't exist. Like, that's just not how you spend your activity, your energy. He spent all of his energy trying to separate people from their health care, trying to figure out new and inventive ways to deny their claim. And he wasn't a cog. He was the mind, the executive in the machine. He was the executor. And we need to understand that that's what villainy looks like in a complex society. That's what villainy looks like in a complex society. And a culture of villainy is a culture that exalts him. Now, I'm going to do a show maybe tomorrow, probably the next day. Apparently, a disproportionate number of Ivy League graduates go into finance or consulting. And then if you don't make it in the finance and consulting, if you don't get hired by one of the big financial or consulting firms at the fancy schools, then those kids go into insurance. And I just think that if the best minds in America are going in the finance, consulting, and then insurance, because that's where the money is in finance, consulting, and then insurance, then we need to do something to reorganize the economy so that financiers, consulting people, and insurers are not making as much money as they are. We need to stop incentivizing that for the best minds in the nation, because the free market is not distributing labor in a way that might be healthy for the nation. So, yeah. Raise your kid in a way that they will not take the $10 million job, if that job means your whole job is figuring out ways to separate people from their health care. Raise them so that they'll say, like, no, I'd rather teach high school or something. Like, I'd rather build something that's meaningful. Civil society works because we all are supposed to do meaningful jobs in civil society, not because we're supposed to exploit market infelicities or the inelasticity of healthcare. He didn't produce something cool that people wanted. He produced something that people needed and couldn't do without, and then squeezed them for it. And that was his industry. That is not something we should look for in America. That's like, we should be ashamed. If you have to say that you're a high level health health insurance worker, you should be a little bit ashamed of your job. And the fact that he wasn't ashamed of his job means that we have a deficient culture. And we need to fix that. And, I'm trying to move my culture in my way. But thank you for your time. If you appreciate what I'm doing, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com. Thank you. My weight class is Karen. I'm trying to change the narrative because, Chris Cuomo came out with a love letter to Brian Thompson, and there are all these news programs who are telling you that Brian Thompson, he was the guy we should worry about because he came from poor upbringings and made something of himself. He made a piece of crap out of himself. He came from modest upbringings and turned himself into a piece of doo-doo. And that's the narrative we need to tell. And we need to be honest that Eichmann in America looks like your logistic officer, looks like your logistics guy who works for a big company whose job is to exploit vulnerable people. Like that's what villainy looks like in America. We need to stigmatize those jobs. Like, I don't really have a problem. I mean, I have some problems with Elon Musk or, Jeff Bezos, but they make something that matters. They make something that matters. Like, they don't have to make it the way I do, but Amazon is cool in its way. It was it had shady business practices for a while by being a loss leader that would drive out companies. But you can make the argument for the existence of Amazon. United Healthcare, the whole thing needs to be federalized. It shouldn't exist. So you're exploiting something that's on the market that actually shouldn't be on the market. You're not creating a market efficiency. You're exploiting the fact that we don't have the politics yet to nationalize our healthcare industry. Or that you're exploiting the fact that people hate black people so much that we can't have national healthcare because that might actually give black people healthcare. Or, there are some other reasons, but it's not trying to take people to Mars or the moon. While Elon Musk thing is not my thing, he's actually trying to produce things. So I have to respect, I respect the fact that he's trying to produce something. But not, and I want more people to try to produce something, not just be rich by doing anything. So, thank you for your time. I'll talk to you later about something a little bit different. If you're just watching me right now, I make this video. I'm trying to help you think through some of the confusions in your life. And one of the big confusions of your life is, what does success look like? And I don't want you to pass on to your kid this idea that success looks like Brian Thompson making $10 million a year separating people from their health insurance. I don't want you to think of that as success. I don't want you to think that that's how an appropriate way to provide for your family. No, you are a villain. You are a villain. And the best thing you could do, I guess, apparently, is maybe die spectacularly. Actually, if you're still alive, I want to save you the attempted assassination. Just quit your job and use your ill-gotten gains to, give it to me, funkyacademic.com, but also launch a campaign and speak the truth about some of the evils of your industry. Be a whistleblower. You make enough money. Be a whistleblower on your industry and move us to a better place. You were confused when you were young, and so you spent your 20s and 30s climbing the ladder in this awful company. But let's be honest, you have enough money now. Cut that out and blow the whistle on your industry so that we all, if you're working for DraftKings right now, or maybe Polymarket, or some of these gambling companies, it's the equivalent of working for Purdue Pharma in the early aughts. Purdue Pharma is that made OxyContin. You're on the wrong side. You're getting paid a lot of money to be on the wrong side of a lot of issues. You should quit that and then blow the whistle on your job. You know what? I'm going to do a whole show. Not tonight. I'm going to do a different show on jobs you should quit. Jobs you should quit and blow the whistle. Jobs you were suborned into and now realize that you are like the villain. And you should just quit and now blow the whistle on your own industry. I'm going to bring up a list of jobs that you should just stop. I think, for example, if you're working for Underdog, if you're doing marketing for Underdog or DraftKings or something like that, right now you need to quit that job and figure out a way to turn your bosses in and make money that way, right? In the comments, go ahead and list a bunch of jobs that really in entire industries that probably shouldn't exist, especially at the scale they do, because they're actually, exploiting vulnerabilities and weaknesses as opposed to creating good just in a non-obvious way. All right. Thank you for your time. I will talk to you. I'll talk to you at another time. But go ahead, fill the comments with jobs. People should just quit and blow the whistle on them on themselves instead. Yeah. If you work for Juul, and you're at that meeting, you do marketing for Juul, and you're at that meeting where they say, we should come up with a mango flavor so that we can get more kids to smoke. You need to quit that job and blow the whistle on Juul, marketing to kids. Like all those vapes and all of that stuff. Yeah. All right. Thank you for your time. Peace.